Welcome back to another episode of The Hardcore Casual with your boy, Bass the Kid. As always, please like and subscribe, share with a friend, an associate, a relative, a work colleague, anyone in between who you think might like the content. I appreciate it. Let's get those subscribers coming in. I appreciate all the new ones that have arrived since the last video and the video before that. More good stuff to come. Still waiting for that stand, but you know, work's got to be done. There was quite a bit that went on this weekend, but I didn't actually get to see everything. So I guess I'll touch on the stuff that I did see first of all, and then any other little stories that have come out since then that are worth talking about, or even stuff back in the week that I didn't really get a chance to catch up on. I'll talk about that as well. So without further ado, start the show. Okay, so last night Frank Warren had a card on, which was headlined by Hamza Shiraz. Now, I actually didn't get a chance to watch this. Some other stuff was going on and it wasn't a priority at the time. Now, one of the downfalls of obviously having the channel is that you generally have to kind of watch everything that's going on, especially domestically, so that you can talk about it, or you can, you know, give your opinions informed on certain things. Now, from the reports I've heard, it was actually a very good card. Chris Andre Boxing, who I trust when he says something, he says it was good. My co-host, you know, Tony Pugilist from, you know, Undefeated, from what I can see in the group chat, he was quite liking it as well. What I can see on Twitter, it was rather interesting. So, you know, we don't really get a lot of really good Frank Warren cards, so when they do happen, I do need to check them out. So I will do so. I know all the results, but obviously I don't want to make too many comments on any of the fights until I do watch it. That being said though, I guess I gotta say well done, Frank. Speaking of Frank Warren, actually no, you know what? I'm gonna leave that just for a little bit. I'll get into that a little bit later on. So a card I did see, undercard and undercard and all, was Ryan Garcia versus Javier Fortuna. Now, before I talk about that main event, I want to give a very special shout out to Oscar Collazo versus Vic Salado. That fight to me was fight of the night on that card. It was tremendous, and it happened on the free portion, you know, the bit that you get either on YouTube, like what they would call the before the bell, but like before the broadcast starts, that bit. It was the final fight of that particular section, and it was incredible. Okay. No, you know, I'm saying incredible. For me, I was on the edge of my bed watching that pretty much the whole fight. I was fully invested. There wasn't really too much moments where like I took my eyes away from the screen to check my phone or do something else. Like, I just fully liked that fight. You had sort of the young up-and-comer Oscar Salazar, who's, you know, I think he's Puerto Rican. You know, very good amateur, quite extensive on his, this was minimum weight, so he was 4-0 at the time. So this was going to be his 5th fight, and it was an eliminator for the WBA minimum weight championship. And Vic Salazar was, I believe, 24-5-1 or some kind of record like that. So, you know, seasoned veteran. I believe he was a former champion as well. So this was definitely one of those, you know, crossroads type fights. And yeah, like, I won't say too much about it. I might leave technical breakdowns and everything for the, you know, for the show on Tuesday. But if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching it. Both guys ended up getting counted in round 7. You know, Collazo sort of hurt him to the body, and then he ended up getting a standing 8 count. He didn't fully go down, but the referee is a woman. She jumped in and stopped, obviously, Collazo from attacking further, but she gave him a standing 8 count. And then just when you think he's about to sort of get stopped, he comes out of nowhere with a devastating uppercut and takes Collazo down. He drops, he ends up hitting the floor, and he takes a count as well. And that was just the 7th round. Like, it was very tactical prior to that, and then after that it was literally just a war of attrition for the next 5 rounds, or 4 rounds I should say. So yeah, like I said, if you haven't watched it, watch that one, but brilliant. I saw the rest of the undercard. I mean, the Roach Jr. versus Rodriguez was a good enough fight, but neither guy did enough that they could really, really sort of cement their place for, I think it was the featherweight title that he was, I think it was an eliminator for that. So Roach Jr. won that. Competent enough, but as I said, I feel like he needed to go through the gears a bit more. Now the Alexis Roach fight, now apologies, because on Undefeated, on the breakdown show on Tuesday, bear in mind I hadn't actually slept for almost 24 hours, so brain wasn't fully engaged. I thought the Roach fight was actually one of the Alvarado twins, so when I was saying, oh yeah, no, I always watch for these fights because I know that they're always good quality scraps. Yeah, it was Alexis Roach who last faced Blair Cobbs. Now, to his credit, I thought that was a really good fight. I enjoyed that one. So but this one was against Veron, I think, or Veron. Guy pretty much just came to survive for the majority of the fight, didn't really look to do much. So yeah, it was a points decision for Roach, business as usual, but nothing really to write home about. Now, when it comes to Garcia versus Fortuna, I initially said that I figured Fortuna would sort of, present him a lot of different problems, southpaw stance. He's a lot more experienced, he's sort of been at the world level, like much higher at a lower weight. Now, the Emmanuel to go fight, I believe, was at a catch weight of I think it was 138. So I thought, oh, okay. Initially, when I'm saying all of this is going to be another 135. Possibly it might be a catch weight because they don't have to make weight, but it's a 135. No, lo and behold, come to find out it's actually his 140-pound debut. So then I'm like, oh, so essentially you aged this guy out a year when you should have fought him more towards his prime. Then not only do you sort of age him up a year and he's kind of had inactivity. Yeah, he managed to get one fight in last year or towards the start of this year, whatever it was, but it was like a one-round blowout. Prior to that, I think his last fight was 2020 or something like that. So he ain't really been active. But outside of that, you're bringing man up a weight as well. So all the thoughts I had of him being like a harder test, and obviously I thought that Ryan would win, but all that what I was saying, him being a harder test, that was all taken into account prior to knowing that it was actually going to be at 140. But I mean, it was a case that Fortuna never really managed to execute anything in there. And to be fair, Ryan did quite well with sort of countering him quite a lot. But all Fortuna essentially was doing all fight was just trying to look for the Luke Campbell hook, the hook that he caught Ryan with back in their fight last year, January. I mean, he had some success. There was one or two times where he did crack Ryan and it looked like he wobbled him a little bit, but overall it was pretty much business as usual. So and now that Ryan is at 140, the whole calling out Tank Davis thing to me is a little bit odd, because Ryan's like what, 5'10". I think he's about the same height as me, maybe a little bit shorter, but he's like 5'10" or whatnot. Tank's like 5'4". You're now at 140. Yeah, Tank fights up there, and I'm the last person to be like a Tank apologist or a defender or whatever, but realistically this guy come from 126 to start with. We've seen what he looks like at 140. Slow, sluggish, like too much weight on him. He's not as explosive and the power ain't really the same there. So are you coming back down to 135 to make that fight? Or is it going to be like a 136 or catch weight? How do you realistically want that fight to go? See, now it just seems like you've got these two guys that they're almost adjacent to actual boxing, because Ryan says belts don't matter and Tank said belts don't matter. So if the belts don't matter, then really and truly you're not fighting anyone for legacy or for accolades. I guess you're fighting, it's almost like novelty fights, you're fighting for money. Well, okay, but the two of you still got to be in the same weight class. It's still got to make sense, and realistically that just doesn't seem like the type of fight that makes sense. I'm gonna leave that one there. Let's see what happens between both of them, what happens with this. Yeah, you can keep calling out Tank, but ultimately it's not really gonna work out, is it? So yeah, card overall wasn't anything special, but like I said, that to me, that Collazo versus Salado fight was what made the card, and it wasn't even on the main broadcast. But before I go, shout out to Ade Oladipo out there hosting. Did a very good job from what I saw. Now, to be totally honest, I watched the very first part when it opened up, and then I fell asleep and watched the main fight in the morning. So there's still some other parts of fights I got to watch and kind of analyze a bit later on. But from what I did see, like, I did an amazing job. So big up, bro. Like, proud of you. Let's get it on the next one. So, a story that I didn't talk about earlier on in the week, which obviously broke, was Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez being ordered to fight Dimitri Bivol for the WBA light heavyweight title. Like, the WBA have sanctioned that as their mandatory. Well, Eddie Hearn has now come out, obviously said that he's trying to petition an exemption so that Bivol can fight Joshua Buatsi. Now, I think the plan, and I'm not gonna take credit for this. I think this was something that Julius from Ring IQ said, which I agree with. But obviously he said it first, so I want to give proper credit where it's due. He says he reckons the plan is for Eddie to get the Joshua Buatsi fight. Then he would have to fight Ramirez after that. He probably wouldn't be able to do the Canelo rematch. So his thoughts is that he's actually in a roundabout way trying to keep Canelo away from Bivol, just because he feels like if he loses again, it's gonna hurt his stock even more. Now, it's a valid point. The problem is, Eddie, I don't see it happening, because Eddie's saying that he's gonna position him for an exemption from the mandatory for him to fight a voluntary. Well, what does the voluntary do? Like, if the mandatory is called, okay, an exemption, there's only two reasons you kind of get an exemption. Number one, if you're unifying with another organization and they see it as being a big fight. Or number two, if it's actually no, to be honest, that one doesn't even count. The number two is if you're coming off of an injury and you're saying, I just need to make sure that, like, body's okay, like, that things are going on, so can I have an exemption just to test out and make sure that everything's all right before I have to fight my mandatory. Now, on the rarest of occasions, you might get a cash cow or like a super big fight where they say, well, look, let me fight this person because they are it's just going to be a much bigger fight, and then it makes the mandatory more important or more lucrative later on down the line. You might occasionally get an exemption like that. The Joshua Buatsi is none of those. It's not a fight that they believe is going to be a better fight than Zurdo Ramirez. It won't sell better than the Zurdo Ramirez fight over in the US, because obviously he's Mexican and that Mexican-American crowd is big, plus the fact that Dimitri Bivol has just fought and beat a Mexican. So that's going to be, that all the intrigue is there. Him coming to the UK to fight Joshua Buatsi is not going to have the same kind of monetary value attached to it. So I feel that's a bit of grandstanding from Eddie Hearn. It's not going to happen. Yeah, so look for that mandatory to take place. But you know what? It's a fight I'm very much looking forward to, because I like Zurdo Ramirez, but ultimately he doesn't do a huge amount. He had a very lackluster 168 career, and so far his 175 career hasn't been anything to write home about. So this could be his jumping off platform, and for Dimitri Bivol, it's just a chance to cement himself as a legit threat and contender, and almost you could say a legit star, beating two Mexicans back to back in America. Looks good work to me. So yeah, sorry Eddie, but that one's not gonna happen. Just let him deal with this fight. Let's get it over with. Speaking of Eddie, something came to my mind the other day, because he just announced a couple of fights for the Triple G and Canelo trilogy card. So obviously we've got Bam Rodriguez against Israel Gonzalez, who I think is number 10 ranked in the division. Now, you know what? Initially, when I saw that fight, I thought, you could do a bit better than that. As the co-main, you could get him a slightly better opponent. But then I was like, well, no, you know what? Gonzalez is good. He's good. He's a credible enough fight. He's a hard night's work for most guys. I don't think he's been stopped by any of the other contenders that he's had. I think he's lost 3 fights, but he hasn't been stopped by anyone. And he's been in there with a couple of world champions before. So I came back and said, no, you know what? The fact that this is 3rd fight of the year, he's already taken out 2 of the quote-unquote 4 kings of the super flyer division. This isn't exactly an easy touch. So all right, you can have it. And it's a competitive. You're keeping him active, and hopefully you might even go out again in December, just before the start of the new year. If he gets out 4 times this year, amazing. So I said, okay, no, so good fight for the undercard. I'll give it that. Then also, Austin Williams has been scheduled to fight Kieran Conway in I guess his first kind of step up. Now obviously that's good for Kieran, he'll get a nice little payday. Austin is technically a step up, but not really, because I feel like he has faced some other guys who probably were of a slightly better level, but it's a name at least, or at least to the Brits, like we know who Kieran is, and he'll definitely go and give it a try. So, but then when I saw that, it kind of made me go back a little bit to the Lawrence Okoli situation that obviously happened last week with the tweets and whatnot. Now, do I think that Eddie Hearn quote unquote runs things like a slave owner, or abuses his fighters like cattle, or maybe underpays them and whatnot? No, I don't. I do think there's people that he maybe isn't paying them fairly compared to others, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily underpaying either. I feel like, or he might be paying them based on he thinks they're going to generate this, and then the numbers might come back in and they've actually done better than he expected, and probably he's not giving them that little bit extra to say, well, you done X, Y, and Z. I think that might be the case with some, but overall I think he pays everyone what he thinks they're going to generate for the shows. He's not overpaying people anymore, well, anyone except obviously the main guys, the Canelos and the AJs, and probably Conor Benn, and even Derek Chisora, to be fair, because as much as Derek likes to mess about and say, oh yeah, you got to start paying me now, Eddie, or pay me more, I want some caviar, you got me eating fish and chips and that. Realistically, Derek Chisora in his last 5 paydays have been good. I mean, I know he got paid more than Alexander Usyk did for the Usyk fight, and he got paid more than Joseph Parker did, I think, for both the fights with them. Definitely the first one. Second one, maybe not, but first one, definite. He got paid very well for the Dillian White fight. He got paid very well for the David Price fight, even though obviously that was David Price was standing in, to be fair. So, Parker the first time, but he's been getting good money. But the reason I bring that up is because if you remember a couple years ago, Ammo Williams, when he was having his mental health drama, and he, was talking, I think he was smoking weed and what at the time, but he put out this rap tune, yeah. Now, a lot of people may not know this, but he put out this rap tune. It wasn't particularly good, but in it, there was a lot of foul mouth rants towards Eddie Hearn. And I think one of the things that I can remember him saying, and I'd have to listen to it again just to confirm, but he said something along the lines of you can't treat my boys or my people like cattle. Who do you think you are to, just to not care about the guy's well-being, or something along those lines. I'll find the link, and I guess I'll put the link in the description for everyone to listen as soon as I can find it. But it was, it just kind of came back to me raw. So Ammo Williams said this a couple of years ago. Now he's admitted obviously he was going through a bunch of problems and whatnot, but he said that. Now you've got Lawrence Okoli talking, sort of Django stuff. We do remember when obviously you had Barry Hearn doing the press conference with Oscar Rivas and Dillian White, when he's talking about, we used to be the slave owners and they're the slaves. Now they're our bosses. Like, you know, we got to do what they say. And it then makes you think, is there a little bit of this old school, look, you're going to fight when we tell you to fight, happening with maybe the guys who don't have the marquee value? Like, for Eddie can't tell Canelo anything, can't tell AJ anything, but could he tell, say, like a Kieran Conroy something? Could he like force someone without that marquee value to say, well, look, this is your fight, take it or leave it, but guess what, you're under contract, so it's either you take this one or, you know, you're not going to get a fight again for the next year. The guys on, you know, on those undercards, is it possible that they are maybe getting treated more like cattle just to round out cards? I mean, how many times have we seen someone just get put in late notice as an opponent to someone else? Or, you know, you got a guy he's been put on the card, but you don't even know who his opponent is until like 10 days before the fight. It's like, well, you're trying to train for a specific person, and maybe that fight is now a lot harder than you thought it was gonna be because you couldn't prepare for who you was going in there with. And you know, Eddie doesn't, you know, historically match his fighters easy and give them soft touches like some other promotions might. So a lot of the people that lost, maybe they lost because they weren't given enough notice for the level of opponent that they were being put in the ring with. I'm just wondering, like, is there more credit to these claims that, you know, have been made, as opposed, or is it just literally people maybe flagrantly using terminology that shouldn't be in boxing because it's not the same? Like, you know, slave owners didn't pay slaves, like, so I don't know how you can be calling someone a slave owner when you're getting paid relatively well. I mean, maybe not the value you think you are, but I guess your value is based on what you can negotiate, right? So if you're getting paid a certain amount and you're accepting that amount, then that means that that's your value. If it's not your value, then you got to work that one out differently and do that better. But I don't know. I don't want to go too deep into it, but I feel like it is something that is worth talking about maybe a bit further. So I'm going to keep my eyes on this, see what else happens, and then, you know, I guess I can take more of an approach on it after that. But yeah, I just thought it was worth mentioning, to be fair. And last, but by certainly no means least, going back to what I was going to say about Frank Warren earlier on after he's put on the good card. So in several interviews in the last few days, he's basically said that the White Fury pay-per-view numbers did better than the initial AJ versus Usyk numbers, but he's saying he's not going to give a figure because what's the point? Ultimately, why do people care? It's none of their business, rare. But everyone knows Frank is chatting bullshit. Let's be real, because if those numbers were amazing, if they were 1.6 million, 2 million, he would tell you. Because when they quote unquote sold 94,000 at Wembley, he told you it was 94,000. Now, we haven't got the official numbers of how many people actually clipped their tickets into the arena, but when it hit 94,000 on the website, he told you it was 94,000. So why does he not want to tell you what the number is, even though he claims it was more than Usyk versus Joshua, the first one? Like, it's a bit of grandstanding there, Frank. And ultimately, one thing he did say, he said, look, everyone made money on the event and we're happy. So that in itself tells me one thing. Tyson Fury didn't get paid, what was it, 30 something million dollars or whatever it was, because remember the purse was 41, but Eddie Hearn already said, well, you know, what you basically do if you control the bulk of the purse is you agree a fee, you overpay, and then you take the rest of the money back. So now, if that event did make money, as Frank is claiming, then that means that Tyson definitely didn't get paid that, because we know from the fact he's not telling us that it's done even $1 million worth of pay-per-view buys. The break-even point, I believe, for them to just break even on what they spent out initially, I think was 1.2 million. I think it was 1.2, 1.3. as just a break even. So he would tell you if it done that. But he's saying that it made money, which means that if Tyson Fury, for instance, let's say he got 18 million and Dillian White got what did he get, 7 or something like that, the rest of that money goes back into the pot. If you done 750,000 buys, you would make a little bit of money on top of that. So yeah, it goes to show that they definitely didn't hit the 1 million pay-per-views. They definitely didn't do 2 million worldwide or wherever they was claiming. That didn't happen, and it probably now confirms that Tyson Fury also didn't get the full 30 something million dollars that, you know, he was saying that he would get from that purse. I think like 32 or something like that. Yeah, but I just wanted to put that out there. Like, Frank, you know, it's nice that you tried to swerve that one, but you know, the people know. Say, if what I'm saying is shit, then someone needs to prove, you know, bring out those figures, prove me wrong, prove everyone else wrong, because so far it just makes you look a bit foolish. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that one in there real quick. All right, well, I'm gonna leave that there. I've got a few other bits and pieces that I need to do today, and I'm probably running behind schedule. It's been a bit of a long night as always, but yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, you know, let's get those numbers up. More, I'm gonna have a couple extra shows coming on this week. Yeah, I've been falling behind. I haven't been doing the usual 3 to 4, so there will definitely be minimum 3, maybe even a few other bits and pieces coming back. We'll see, but for right now, Hardcore Casual out.